Sheryl R. Wilson, MLF, is the Executive Director of the Kansas Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, KIPCOR, and has been a practitioner, trainer, and educator in restorative justice for over 20 years, working with individuals, nonprofits, academic institutions, and public agencies from around the world. Her work in restorative justice has included facilitating restorative justice dialogues in various venues, including virtual keeping for national forums, working as a community mediator, and serving as a researcher. Her experience also includes teaching restorative justice courses at the college level, community outreach, victim offender dialogue, and defense-initiated victim outreach in capital cases. Sheryl is a graduate of the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, holding a restorative justice master, Master of Liberal Studies degree. She's a Kansas State approved mediator, past president of the National Association of Community and Restorative Justice, NACRJ, board of directors, and served by appointment on the Kansas Supreme Court's Advisory Council on Dispute Resolution. She is the author of a chapter in Colorizing Restorative Justice, a book about restorative justice practitioners of color and the challenges they face. In July this year, 2024, Sheryl will transition from her role at KIPCOR to become the Vice President of Culture and Belonging at Bethel College. Please give a warm welcome to Sheryl.
Thank you, Erin. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for Jonathan for bringing me here. And I have to tell you, EMU is a special, special place. I used to live in North Carolina. So, you know, place is a big deal to me. I just have to kind of go back to earlier. We did all of these introductions and talked about where we call home. So many of you were naming places that I've actually lived, like Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is my second home. It's like my adopted home. It is where I have my RJ roots. I also, so when I used to live in Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area of North Carolina, I would take the drive from there to here, which is the most beautiful drive, right? Yes. And so I miss this part of the country. I am an East Coaster, as I said before. I'm from Tallahassee, Florida. I am a Southerner with Midwestern roots as well, so I'm somewhat of a hybrid. The South bore me, the Midwest raised me. So you figure that out. So, but I've also lived in Atlanta, Georgia area. I've also lived in Montgomery, Alabama. So I've got some places where I've been where it's what shaped me, and place is something that excites me when I hear where people are, what's special about those places. And the way that you get to do this work in those places is exciting to me to hear about. So when I interact with you, I hope to hear how things are going, restoratively speaking, in your neck of the woods, as Al Roker would say. Okay, never mind. I think about this place being one of the meccas of restorative justice. When I was in Minnesota, it was a big deal to know that someone was EMU trained, EMU graduated, or just from this part of the country. So I can't even tell you how beyond honored I am to be here. I want to say a little bit about how, and I guess the conversation I'm going to have with you today. I told Jonathan, I said, I don't think I gave you a title for my speech, and I don't know if that was important, but I'll say it to you. I've titled it, We're All Neighbors, RJ as Community. I am talking a lot about community. And I'll say a little more about that later. But just know that a lot of what I'm thinking about in the ways that we do this work is how we do it in connection with each other. So I will say, in my work currently at KIPCOR, my orientation to restorative justice in a lot of ways is connected to K-12 educators. We train K-12 educators at KIPCOR in restorative practices in the tune of thousands of educators we've been able to impact because of, largely after the pandemic, we stayed in virtual space so that we could train more and more educators that way. We were those people that packed up and went to wherever the schools were and all of that. But you know, you can only train so many people in a room. But on Zoom, you can be very creative. And at least we're spreading the word, and we do a lot of coaching still in person, but it's given us the access to people around the state. So I will say the thing that I remember that kind of orients me to talk about K-12 educators is the first person that impacted me in K-12 is my mother. My mother, Dorothy Adams, was a third grade teacher in Tallahassee, where I grew up, and she was that teacher. And even if she weren't my mom, I would say she was pretty darn incredible. And she was doing restorative practices before we were labeling it that. So recently, my mom's been retired for a while, but she came across this meme that I have to share with you because it very much expresses some of the things that she dealt with as an educator. And I'll say more about that once you hear this. But the meme is of a note that angry Isaiah had for his teacher. He says, "Dear Miss Jones, I am very angry at you because you took 25 of my hummingbird bucks, all because I was talking to Connor. That's no big deal. I'm only 6. I can't be quiet all the time. And that makes you a thief and a crook. And you are going to hell. Real hell. The burning one, because you are a thief. I worked hard for those bucks. And my only prayer in chapel today was that God gets you to hell fast, super fast, and your new haircut is bad, real bad, Isaiah." So, of course, when my mother sent me this, we could not stop laughing. But I will tell you, Dorothy Adams would have reeled angry Isaiah in. She never had a student that she didn't win over, because that's who she was in the classroom. She would go to her principal every year and she would say, "Who's coming up next to 3rd grade? That is your biggest concern." And she would say, "Put him in my room." Special needs, learning disabilities, you name it. My mother always was up for the challenge. One of my favorite stories to tell about her is there was a young man named Mike. Mike was born with a lot of challenges, and he one of the biggest deals is he could only see out of one eye. He had a glass eye in his other socket, which, by the way, she would say occasionally Mike loved to take it out and roll it around. But anyway, this one particular day, in Florida, you can see the space shuttles go up. So that was a big deal to go out on the lawn and see the space shuttle. And so that day, they all went out, and Mike just was like really struggling. And she was like, "What's going on, Mike? What's wrong?" He said, "I can't see it, Miss Adams, I can't see it." And she bent down, and she said, "Don't worry, Mike, I will be your eyes." And she described in great detail exactly what was happening in the sky so that he could be fully present in that moment. That's who my mom is. So before I knew about RJ, I knew about my mom and all of the things that she put into her work. So I'm also the daughter of Ernest Adams, Sr., who was the first African-American firefighter for the city of Tallahassee. And so because of that, being a first, he prepared me for so many things that I would encounter in my life where I might be the only and I might be the first. And that has come to fruition, especially living in Kansas, being at Bethel College, being at KIPCOR, being in a lot of spaces where I am the only person of color, the only black woman, the only black person, to do a lot of things. And I draw strength from that. So I bring them with me into the room. One of the other things that I will say about the impact of just the ways that we do this work as educators is there are so many things that we do that are never going to be said, never going to be acknowledged, and there are thankless ways that we do the work that we do. And I'm saying, I see you. I honor the work that you do, and I value the ways that you show up. So when I think about how restorative justice as community, in the way that we do this work, I have to go back to the early years and tell you a little bit about my comeuppance. So I'm a little old. I had to think about this the other day. The way I mark time is when I heard about restorative justice and the first time I've ever heard restorative and justice together was in a classroom at University of Minnesota taking a class from Dr. Mark Albright in mediation and conflict resolution. And that was the first time he said restorative justice. He talked about it and kept talking about it. And I was like, God, this sounds like something I could get excited about. And when that class was over, it was an intensive. So when you do intensives, you go for like a whole week, like, you know, you're in a close community of folks. At that point, at the end of the week, that was the light bulb coming over my head saying, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is where I'm supposed to go. So I knew then that I would become a practitioner, whatever that was supposed to be, I was gonna be it. That was 30 years ago, and I marked time because I was very pregnant with my 30-year-old son now. And that's bittersweet. And I've had many great experiences after that. Like, even though I knew that I wanted to be that, there was a while before, and some of you probably have been there too. It's like, I know I want to do this, but I need to get paid. So I got to keep this job over here, and I got to do that until I can get to a space where I can, you know, ball out and do this for real. So at the time when I was able to come back to Mark Albright and say, please mentor me, then he's like, okay, I want you to come to this training. So the first training I ever came to, was a snowy day, and I think it was like maybe in February or March or something. And Mark had this special guest that was helping with the training. And I came in late because it was super snowy and I couldn't get there fast enough. So Mark said, okay, you're gonna be in a group with me and Howard. So I'm like, okay, sure. So I sit with these two older men and we're talking about our experiences around, I don't know what the prompt was. To this day, I don't remember what the prompt was, but I just know the guy Howard said something about, yeah, when I was in college at Morehouse, and I was like, say more, not knowing who Howard was and all of his other accomplishments. That was what I was hung up on, but then we moved on and we got into the training and everything, and I'm just like, huh? So anyway, all of that, fast forward, of course, I felt super honored later to know that, and Howard was so understated, there, and very present, but not in any way knowing who this person was and how he would impact my life later. But I just know for me, I grew up in an HBCU background. For Florida A&M, I don't put it on my, I should have my resume somewhere again, and I'm sorry for those of you who are HBCU lovers. I went to Florida A&M, but I didn't graduate from there, but to the chagrin of my parents and my mother and father and brother, and my husband, they all graduated from there. But anyway, I'm adjacent. All that said, that interested me. In Minnesota, in my comeuppance, I got to be around some of the greats that you know about, like Kay Pranis. And there's Alice Lynch, for some of you who may be familiar with her. As a matter of fact, Alice Lynch has passed on, but the last time I saw Alice Lynch was at EMU in 2016 when she came for the conference here. Oscar Reed, who some of you may know who he is, but if you didn't know him as an RJ person, you probably have heard of the Purple People Eaters of the Minnesota Vikings. He was a Viking and happened to be into restorative justice. So that was a bonus because my family, I got cred from my husband because I knew Oscar Reed. And then Harley Eagle, who some of you may know, these were my early teachers. I feel like I can go down like a Hall of Fame list, and I just happened, it was because of place. It was because of where I was positioned and who, I happened to have a connection with somebody who connected with some of the brightest and the best in the field. So the impact of these people is huge and still very relevant. And I definitely stand on the shoulders of these people who raised me up in the field. So I'm very grateful for that comeuppance. So I'm going to say, despite all of that, I was always struck by how predominantly white the field was at that time. And I know this because I, as a practitioner, would do work in very white spaces in Minnesota. And I would show up, they might have a name, Sheryl Wilson. You put it on paper, like Tiffany Haddish. I look like a white woman on paper. That's what she says all the time. Yeah. Anyway, she talks about her credit score and all that. Anyway, so the thing that was great was that my name, my credentials would get me in the door, and then I would show up looking like me. And people would sometimes look past me. They would sometimes think it was a mistake. But like Dorothy Adams, I would win them over. I try not to leave people behind. But it was always challenging, thankless, exhausting to do that. And I often would find solace when I would go to conferences and talk to other practitioners of color, especially Black people, to get my energy, my battery recharged, and we would just find solace in one another. And so coming to places where there was a chorus of people like this would often give me what I needed to have to go back out and fight another day. So many years later, in 2020, I got the opportunity to chronicle the things that I was dealing with in my chapter in Colorizing Restorative Justice, Voicing Their Realities. This book was published in 2020, and I don't know if some of you got it when it was published, but if you'll recall, it was at a moment we could not have predicted the impact of that book at that time, because it was right following the murder of George Floyd and how we were cracked open in this country over what happened. And it couldn't have been a better time, like people paid attention to what we had to say in that time. I think having those conversations with people, even engaged, well-intentioned white people, felt like there was some resonance, but they really got it in that moment. And that felt really great to feel seen and heard. So all of that, and just for what it's worth, my chapter, Calling Out Whiteness, was my lived experience at that time. I wasn't writing about, in the moment that I wrote about these things, yes, I took into account what it was like for me as a practitioner over those years, but I also had to acknowledge I was in that narrative in my current role at KIPCOR at Bethel College in North Newton, Kansas. I was just having a conversation with Howard about I'm being transparent, okay? So I'm just gonna put this out there. I'm recruiting people to join us at KIPCOR. And I know nobody has Kansas on their list, places where they want to live and grow up, raise your kids, be active and social. And Howard goes, yeah, I just still don't understand how you did that. And I was like, yeah, I sometimes wake up in the morning and go, oh yeah, that's right, I'm here, I'm in Kansas, that's right, I did that. Yeah, it's almost 7 years, I'm still here. But you know what? It's a great place. It is. And if you are at EMU, you will feel very at home at Bethel. And I'm Mennonite adjacent because I am at Bethel. I was a little Mennonite adjacent, but I'm in there. And everything but signed on, But yes. We love what we built. We love the work. And Kansas is a beautiful place. It really is. In that narrative, though, I have to say, despite the loveliness of the work and of the chorus, there's still the fact that I am a Black girl in a very white place, and there is a level of, when I wrote about it, I had to acknowledge that it wasn't just the state of being, but it was also the mental health ways that I had to acknowledge what was happening to me. And after George Floyd, it took on a whole other layer, and I had to say, there's a level of PSTD, there is a level of depression sometimes that comes with being a person of color in a predominantly white space. And so all of that was part of what I was unpacking. In the book, I say, over the years, I've become more emboldened to call out whiteness and white privilege in many settings, most especially in the spaces where I am working as a practitioner of restorative justice. By saying that I call out whiteness, I mean that I inform those who are in power or leadership that as a person of color, I recognize that the creation of predominantly white work settings is a form of white supremacy, and I ask them to recognize it as well. And so that's the mission that I'm on all the time. I also say whiteness is greedy. When people of color try to claim their hard-won spaces, whiteness retaliates out of insecurity. In other words, whiteness has to hold all the power. Whiteness is different from having white skin, but people with white skin have been experientially conditioned since birth to take on the mindset and behavior patterns of white supremacy. The arrogance, the greediness, the privilege, the presumed superiority, and the entitlement and stolen power to own, control, dominate, exclude, and harm others. This mindset is whiteness, and it is what needs to be called out. And some of these people are my best friends. So I don't say this with vitriol, I just say this with how pervasive whiteness is. And it's not just white people, it's how we all play a role in it, no matter what color we are. So I also say there are ways that if you have privilege and you are white, there are ways that you can do more, do better, do your part. There are ways that we have in society been talking about being allies. And I'm not down on that word, don't get me wrong. But I talk about in my chapter that we need to take it a step further and not just say we're allies. Allies is like, I'm your friend, it's convenient. When it's convenient, I will be there for you and I will support you. I don't know if I'm doing that when times get hard though, if I'm your ally. That's me, that's the way I perceive it. But I use another word and I say accomplice. If we're accomplices, we are down for the cause. We are lockstep with you. If I go down, you go down. If I get arrested, you get arrested. If I lose my job, okay, wait, no. Yeah. But some of us, that is what we need. We need you to be right with us. And so I say there are ways that we can work toward restoratively changing predominantly white spaces, and we should. And the way that we do that is at the beginning. The reform begins when we start a project, when whatever the bright idea is, or whatever we're doing together in community. Who gets to be at the table in the beginning, at the inception, is how you start to restoratively transform predominantly white spaces, that you are curating this in a way that you are mindful about who gets what privilege in that moment. Because if you're a person of color, you know what it's like to be called after something has started. And they realize, oh my gosh, it is not diverse. What are we gonna do? We can call, and everybody in this room that is a person of color, you are shaking your head because it has happened to you. So the way we do that is we start at the beginning. It also requires, I didn't say it's a suggestion, it requires people who are white to consider all of the ways that you need to up your understandings of racism. I would suggest anti-racism training, not the be-all end-all, just to start. Any types of training that helps you to understand your privilege, your biases, all of those things is kind of a baseline. Then after that, there's still the work. You still got to do the work. Like, I love it when people take trainings and they check it off on the box, put it on your resume. That's really super cool, because I'm anti-racist and wearing the Black Lives Matter shirt and all that. Got the sign in my yard about all people are welcome. We got those signs too at Bethel, just so you know, we sell them at Kipcor. So all of that to say, you have done all of the things, but it is an ongoing work. It is connecting with people constantly to do better and to stay, sometimes just knowing when to stay in your lane. It's also educating one another on ways that we just have to continue to work on inclusivity. Myself included, just because I'm a person of color doesn't mean I'm always thinking inclusively. We all have that on our list of things that we need to do better. I think about the ways that it's not just about our ethnicity. It is about so much more connected to our identity. It is about the ways that we recognize people who may have different ways of identifying as non-binary, as trans, as LGBTQIA+. All of those ways that we recognize and we show, we let people know that we are there for them, we are connecting with each other, and it is about just continuing to spread that the widest possible net to make sure that everybody feels like they have a voice and a connection with whatever is going on. It requires, I think, the commitment that we will have to our practice, our values as restorative justice folks. I think things that we do around inclusion require good process. I think about that in terms of the next chapter for me. When I did get asked to be in this role, this next role as Vice President of Culture and Belonging, it wasn't something I went seeking after. My president asked me to do this. And I thought about it and I was like, maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to go next. Like like I said, I wasn't trying to go to Kansas. I wasn't trying to do this, but I felt called. And some of you will understand what I mean by that. As a person of faith, I said to myself, I have been praying for the right job, for the right everything to come to me in North Carolina, and I kept getting beat out. I have I kept all of the rejection letters because I was number 2 so many times for jobs. I was number 2. Oh, we're down to 2 candidates. It's you and somebody else. And I kid you not even 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. It was constant. I say all of this to say it wasn't coming. As much as I wanted to stay there and do that, it didn't come to me there. But God said, I got this for you, but it's going to be over there. And it's going to hurt a little bit. And you're going to be by yourself the first whole year you're there. Oh my God. I can't even tell you, when my husband left me in that house by myself the first night, I thought, what have I done? And I'm just telling you, I had never lived alone a day in my life before that. So I was boo-hoo crying like, I can't believe I've done this. And no, if anything happens to me in the night, But I did that. Then I got really good at it. Then I was living the single life, and then my family had to come back and screw it all up. No, I will tell you what has been great. My son came kicking and screaming, I'm not gonna lie. He got accepted to all of these great schools out here on the East Coast. He got accepted to Hampton. And we tried, we really did. But he didn't get the full ride. So we were like, dude, free is what I'm offering you. So, free one, he came. He was not happy. And I will tell you, his first couple of years were not great. But there was something about that environment. It was something about the Mennonites. Something about all of that at Bethel that warmed him up. And my son graduated with happiness and honor and excitement. And I would have thought that he would have gone to grad school like back on the East Coast. Do you know he went to KU? He stayed in Kansas and went with some Bethel roommates, and they moved and broke camp in Lawrence, and he graduates in 2 weeks too, like all the rest of some of you. So yay, Sam. But Sam has drank the water. He was in my restorative justice class. He's taken some training, and he got a job at the Office of Student Conduct at KU because he had all of those skills. So I'm really proud of him. And what he will do with that, will be amazing. My husband came to Kansas, and he ended up working at Bethel. He didn't drink the Kool-Aid of restorative justice, but he was restorative justice adjacent. My restorative justice husband, knows how to support, knows how to pass the talking piece, knows how to sit in circle, all those things. It's pretty awesome. I say all of these things to say, it is about the community. It is about how we bring all of us along into all of this. I'm also grateful to have had the opportunity to not just talk about this whole idea of what colorizing did for me, but there have been a lot of other projects that have come to me in the time since. I've been very fortunate to have some other colleagues at Bethel who I partnered with to do a project around slow leadership. Slow leadership is something that my partners, Dr. Christine Krause-Dick, who is a professor and chair of communication arts and chair of the arts and humanities at Bethel, and Dr. Rachel Ep. Buller, who is a professor of visual arts and design and a director of the Regier Art Gallery and former chair of our faculty. These are people I get the honor to work with on this. Slow Leadership was born out of our mutual recognition that we need a different way of operating organizations. We basically utilize our skills around communication, deep listening, and restorative practices to look at how we can help to change the ways that we dispense leadership. We basically look at how we offer the alternative to forceful, autocratic, and anxiety-driven ways of leadership. And we do this through a series of prompts that really encourage us to be interactive, inclusive, all of the things I just spoke about earlier, and how we do that with the idea that we are thinking more intentionally, more mindfully. We incorporate mindfulness in our work. We borrow all of this idea conceptually from what we know as the slow food movement, if any of you are familiar with that. The idea that when the slow food movement was born in Italy, it was out of this angst that people were seeing all these fast food places come in and kind of crowd out all of the ways that we cultivate food. We bring it from the land, we cook it, and it takes time. And it's beautiful and bountiful. That is somewhat how we want to cultivate leadership. And the coolest thing about what we do and what we promote is that leadership is not hierarchical, and it can come from anyone at any time. So that is slow leadership. I also am thrilled to work on a project that has been kind of something that I've been percolating for a long time with Barb Taves. I've shared with her many years ago about how we pay a lot of attention in the Little Book series to what happens when someone commits harm, and we know how to act when someone has been harmed. But we know that there are three stakeholders, right? There's victims, offenders, and I use those words as placeholders because we really don't, we're not trying to label people necessarily. But that other word, that other stakeholder is community. What do we do if we're community? Who's the community? What's my role? How am I supposed to be? That's the question. And I think what has been exciting is to explore this idea of how we, pay attention to those of us who are those people. What happens when we're witnesses, bystanders? We may be actually victims secondary victims, traumatized by something that we happen to be adjacent to in the space of witnesses of. How do we respond in those moments? And I have a colleague, some of you may know her, Caitlin Morneau. She and I are, and she is also an EMU alum. She and I are working on this together. We are so thrilled to be working on this book. Hopefully, maybe next year it'll be out. Hoping we can stay on track. But all of that to say, we want to promote this idea of being good neighbors. What is a good neighbor? I will admit, I have not always been the best neighbor, even as a person who has been in restorative justice. I've needed to be reminded how to do that. I remember a situation where I had neighbors. I lived in a city block area where there were, people that I knew, we checked in on. We did all the neighborhood stuff that neighborhood national night out. We did block parties. We checked on each other. So I felt like really proud of that. So when I get this call one day from my friend who lived across town, and she said, I was watching the news and there was this story that was about this unfortunate situation with this young lady who had a baby. She threw the baby in the garbage. A teen who was hiding her pregnancy from her family. Thankfully, the baby was saved, but it had, been splashed across the news. And she said, I think that was in your block, because you know how they say the block numbers, a lot of these in city areas, they kind of give you a somewhat of a vicinity. And she said, I think that was your block. And I said, I would know, because I prided myself in knowing my neighbors. So I watched the news later, and to my shame, that was in my block. Now, what happened was that it was the connection was I knew the grandmother, but the teen was her grandson, who I did not know, and this was the girlfriend. All that to say, even after I learned that it was my neighbor and they were dealing with this trauma, whatever was happening, I didn't go over there. I didn't check on them. I kind of moved on, kind of ashamed. And I realized later, I could have done any number of things. And I just chose to mind, and I'm saying this because mind my business is something I talk about, because that's what we do. We say, oh, well, that's not my thing. I don't need to get into that. I need to mind my business here. They don't want me there, making all kinds of assumptions. One of the things that we've been exploring is there is this way that we kind of act in community where it's either mind your business or I'm in your business, right? There's a spectrum, right? And so in that spectrum, I think that in the middle somewhere, there is the practice of being a good neighbor. And we have to find our lane, but we don't have to go there and get all up in somebody's Kool-Aid to know, their business. But we can do the human things, checking in. Can I help you with your kids? This must be really hard for them. Can I give you a meal? If I can't give you a meal, can I give you a gift card? Can I do something? Mow your lawn, because you're going to be away for a while. This is obviously time consuming. There's so many things that we can do to be good neighbors. There's so many ways we can be a good friend to somebody that's working with us, that's going through something. What does community look like when we are doing those things? That's what we want to explore in this book. And I say all of this to say there is a role, there is something that we probably need to pay attention to in order to do that and be good neighbors for each other. I know I've talked about all these ways that we are in community, that we connect with each other. I think about the platform that I got many years ago. For 10 years, I was part of NACRJ on their board of directors. 5 of those years was as president of the board. I got to see things from around the country and in some ways the world, and what was happening with regard to restorative justice, and it had been such an honor. And just amazing things that I got to connect with people about what they were doing, and amazing people I got to be in the company of. The thing that my takeaway from those years is things are best done in community when they are done in collaboration. When we brought people to Chicago, we loved the idea of talking about the hubs. You guys have heard about the Chicago hubs? They bring together all of the people who are doing this work in various organizations and school districts so that they have their beloved community. These are the ways that they get their batteries recharged regularly. And I'm sure they have their ups and downs and challenges, but I'd rather fight with you guys than be over there by myself doing this alone in my silo. So whatever it is that it takes for us to be in community, bring it on. But we wanted to showcase that. The idea of doing things in collaboration makes sense. And I'm gonna tell you something. The best way to get good resources is doing it in collaboration. I think that it is a hard thing for me to see people get boatloads of money from funders, and it's all hoarded, and I'm sorry I'm using that word, and I'm sorry if I've stepped on some toes by saying that, but I do think when it's spread out, where if I get it, I'm parceling out some to you, and I'm parceling some out to you, and I'm doing this with it in my community. Let's be those people, because I think about, we struggle with how to define restorative justice. There is no one textbook definition, but collaboration is one of those things that I think should be part of how we think of ourselves when we are talking about restorative justice, that we do it in community, that we do it in some ways transparently. We're not behind closed doors making decisions and excluding people. That all of the ways that we exist in this, what I call beloved community, is in ways that we're out in the open, good, bad, and different. We make it happen together. What is that saying? It's an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. Okay, did I say that wrong? No, I said it right. Okay, but if you want to go far, go together. All that said, I know that I would rather be with the people that are part of the choir, doing this in community, and making great things happen. So I say to you, when I think about that in connection to the other works, the other things that I do, I'm a part of a great organization called Life Comes From It. We do a lot of the, we're able to support and honor the work of people who are doing restorative justice work, transformative justice work, land-based healing, and indigenous peacemaking. We honor those people, especially those who are people of color-led organizations. We try to bring the resources to those who are usually overlooked, those who are usually understaffed, who may not even have a fiscal sponsor. There are ways that a lot of these organizations may not have the privileges that some more refined organizations have. We want to recognize and shine a light and support and give those organizations the same opportunities that some of the more funded organizations have. And dare I say, the more white-led organizations. So in that, I feel like another way that I can do this work in community in ways that supports and has that wide open net of just being as inclusive as possible. And at KIPCOR, where I work, I have hopefully expanded their understandings of what KIPCOR does, who KIPCOR is connected to, and help shine a light on Kansas in ways that maybe people didn't even know stuff was happening in Kansas. It's exciting to bring in people who, like yourselves, have been some of it anywhere and everywhere. Love to bring you there so that people can see how great the work is everywhere. And so in all of that, I think about where we land in the book the little book that we're writing. We talk about MLK's version of the beloved community and how exciting it is when people are doing things like this in ways that they honor each other, that they cherish each other. I want that. That is what I work toward every day. I want that for you, and I don't even know some of you, but I want that for you. Because we should all have access to our own beloved communities. And what does your beloved community look like? I leave you with those thoughts and ideas. I thank you for letting me tell a little of the story that drives the work that I do. I look forward to connecting with you throughout the rest of the day today. And I'm grateful to have had this opportunity. Thank you so much for listening.